challenges that I'm glad I'm engaging in because it teaches me something about me. So if you get me on the subject of my daughter, we'll be here for a long time talking about that because my kid is, I'm sure lots of parents say this about their kids, but I, I think my kid is the best. So not true, Beljora. I am completely objective about my child. No, I mean, for sure. Right. Just wait till Common Core math. Nothing to worry about there, my friend, because she's not going to be getting any standardized stuff as long as I can help it. Her first few years, she's in private school specifically so we can avoid the ridiculous amount of homework and standardized testing, which is actively anti-education. So, yeah, nothing to worry about there. I'm not against Common Core per se, but I am extremely against the incredible overuse of standardized testing. There's basically 3 standardized tests that you ought to give, and that is a PSAT and an SAT/ACT, depending on where you are. And after you get out of college, GRE, and that's it. As far as like ones that everybody should get, that's it. This nonsensical series of standardized tests and having everyone in the world give one after 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th, ugh, man. Ugh. Just not having. She'll hate you in a few years. Hey, what's up, Guilt? Welcome in, man. She'll hate you in a few years. Well, I know, Alphador. Everyone keeps telling me. It's funny. I get 2 things from people. One thing I get is, oh, enjoy it because this isn't going to last. I heard that like 3-4 years ago. So far, you know. And then the other thing I keep hearing is, oh, this is a great age. Literally every year of her life has been a great age. Oh, she's 2? Great age. 7. Like, I can't wait until she's like 45. Like, oh, this is a great age. 45 is a great age. You're going to love her at this age. Like, I mean, oh, man. So we'll see. Thanks for the host, Guilt. I appreciate it. You were homeschooled for 1st and 2nd grade. Ah, cool. Cool, Dragon. Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I don't want to... nice, Guilt. That's awesome, man. I don't want to get into this too much, I promise, because we do need to get into a game, but I'm just going to say this, and I think I have a sympathetic audience here, but I just want to say this very quickly. I have been teaching now for over 20 years, and I think I know what I'm talking about. I've taught at literally every level, from kindergarten up through college teaching, and I've taught some graduate students as well, and I've advised students, and, you know, I've done this for a long time. And the one thing I can say for 100% certain is that the last and most useless thing that exists, or I shouldn't say useless, the least useful, there are uses for it, but the least useful thing, least useful tool in a teacher's toolbox is the test. Of all things that can teach students something, testing is the least valuable. Testing is a snapshot. Testing captures a moment in time, and most of the time a test is very good at determining if someone is good at a test. Any test, no matter how well designed. Standardized tests do this, except that they also then turn it up to 11, because they do that, and then on top of it, they want to make everyone into particular batches, which American education tends to be obsessed with anyway. And so I'm telling you right now that the amount of effort and time that are put into standardized tests and the amount of work that students are put through is criminal. It's criminal. It is wrong. It is illegitimate. And it has nothing to do with the big bad government controlling lives. It's got nothing to do with that. It's that it's pedagogically stupid. It is pedagogically dumb. It has nothing to do with whether someone has actually picked up on a particular subject or information or knowledge. Period. So it frustrates the hell out of me to listen to these people who know nothing about education, because these people tend to be business people, step up and say, here's the way that things ought to be done. Do you think they'd feel the same way if I walked into a boardroom and I started talking about profit and loss statements? No, but everyone, in no other profession can you just walk in and everyone's like, oh, I guess you must be an expert on education. In no other place is that the case. If I walk into a freaking garage and I'm like, oh, listen, you ought to do this with a carburetor, the guy will look at me like I have 2 heads, and he should, because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. If I walk into a business, same kind of thing. If I walk into any of these things. But what I do know a lot about is I know a lot about writing, I know a lot about music, and I know a lot about education. And these people come in and tell me my business, and the business is that testing and the obsession with data and numbers and hard facts is absolute nonsense. So I'm telling you right now. Welcome in, Devil X91. I'm telling you right now. And that's not to say your real world that you can design to help build an entire 2-story house. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, listen, this is now tests are a necessary evil to a degree. Like you need to have a test once in a while. Like I think it makes sense to have a midterm exam, you know? I think it makes sense to have a final exam. That's fine. But it's a factor in the overall course of a semester or the course of a year, and it is not the most important factor at all. And yet, this is the thing that people are putting emphasis on, this nonsense about data and information and all those kinds of things. It's just, it's, you know, yeah, it's crazy. What's up, Sundar? Yeah, I apologize for going on this rant. In fact, you know what? Okay, let me ask you guys a question, because seriously, I know, you know, we're here to play games and all that. Would you guys mind if I played you guys about a 7-minute video that is probably the best video I've heard on the current state of education in the United States? Would you guys be, and I promise you'll find it interesting, would you guys mind that? Or is that like, where you're like, no, go to the game right now? Because if people are like, no, I'm leaving, then I'll go right into the game, because I don't want to, you know. But Thorg mentioned Common Core, which I'm not even that opposed to the Common Core, but I am opposed to the testing that's rigged to it. So I'm curious. Are you guys cool with that or no? Like, no, no, seriously. No. Don't cap it. No. Put aside sarcasm. Put aside sarcasm for a minute. Seriously. Are you guys cool with it? Because I don't want to sort of push people out, but I think you guys might find it interesting. Dragon, I think you're 100% right. I couldn't agree with you more. It's not long, Sundare. It's not. It's like 7 minutes. And I couldn't agree with you more, Dragon. I think you're 100% right. Now, I do think not all teachers do that. Remember, teachers are now being forced into this by administrators. So this is not all on the, you know, a lot of this is not on the teachers. But I agree with you that there are some teachers who use testing as an excuse, and it's a way to make things easy for them. I couldn't agree more. And none of my classes do that, by the way. Not a single one of my classes. My classes are heavily discussion-oriented, and they are back and forth with me and the students for the entire class. 75% of the time. And the other percentage of the time are these little sort of mini discussions and mini lectures about different, you know, particular aspects of things that we're working through with examples, group work, and stuff like that. I couldn't agree with you more, Dragon. Couldn't agree with you more. Okay. If it's 50 minutes, I'm out. It's not 50 minutes. Okay, here we go. Let me find it. This video that I'm about to give you is from... hold on a second. There we go. This one that I'm about to give you guys is from a guy named Sir Ken Robinson, who is an expert on education from originally Great Britain and now lives in California. And it is the best video by a long shot that I have ever seen on education, at least the current state of it. So I think you guys are going to like this, and I think you'll find it interesting. It's done in a style where it's actually drawn. Like you guys know those old UPS, while I'm doing this, I'm actually capturing it. So you guys know those UPS commercials they used to have where they have the person drawing on the whiteboard? That's basically what this is. And it's done to his speech, to like his commentary. So I'm gonna play this, and then we'll get into Alpha Protocol right after this, I promise. Okay. Let's see if that worked. Lovely. Okay. All right, I'm going to... I think what I might do is I might pull myself back here. Let me pull myself back for a minute. And let's pull this up. Okay, here we go. Let me know how the sound is, by the way, guys. Okay, let me know how the sound is. Let me know if it's too loud or not.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are two reasons for it. The first of them is economic. People are trying to work out, how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that? Given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent turmoil is demonstrating. How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out, how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization. How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which is if you worked hard and did well and got a college degree, you would have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not, but it's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the route to it marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. And people say we have to raise standards as if this is a breakthrough. You know, like, really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? You know, I mean, I haven't come across an argument that persuades me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic circumstances of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, you could get educated by Jesuits, you know, if you had the money. But public education, paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that was a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many street kids, working class children, to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into it a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence. That real intelligence consists in the capacity for a certain type of deductive reasoning and a knowledge of the classics originally, what we come to think of as academic ability. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education, that there are really two types of people, academic and non-academic, smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. There have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD.
This is amazing, this part.
Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescriptions for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say if there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and paediatricians think there is such a thing. But it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out. And on the same whimsical basis, and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? You know, boring stuff at school, for the most part. It seems to me it's not a coincidence totally that the incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of standardized testing. Now, these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. If you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively of the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up
100%
to what they have
right.
inside of themselves.
100%
But
right.
the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. You know, we put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? You know, why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? You know, it's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, you know, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking.
This is great too.
Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, I mean, there are tests for this. I mean, one kind of cod example would be people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? One of those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? You know, like, does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? You know. Now, there are tests for this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking?
I want to ask that same question to you guys. What do you think the percentage of people that they tested were at the, what level do you think tested at the genius level for divergent thinking? What do you guys think? Just like throw out a couple of numbers in chat. And I'm only about maybe like 4 hours into it, Crip. What do you do? And how you doing, Crip? What's going on? 120. Percentage. 5%, less than 10%. Ah, now let me give you another bit of information. What if I told you that the group that they were surveying was kindergartners? So these 1,500 people were all kindergartners. What percentage of those would you think tested at the genius level for divergent thinking? If I told you they were kindergartners. 100%, 100%, 97, 0, 98, 95, 70. Kindergartners. Okay, let's see.
Now, you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 50? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity.
All of us.
And two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. You know, they've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. I mean, outside schools, that's called collaboration, you know, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way, it's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Secondly, we have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
Now that, to me, is the best video I have ever seen on summarizing the current educational system. I think that is absolutely brilliant. And I think he's 100% right. I have no argument. I guess I could maybe quibble a little bit with the whole, you know, copying isn't cheating thing, which is sort of what he's implying. That's not exactly accurate, but I think that is absolutely brilliant. This guy, Ken Robinson, is amazing. He is absolutely amazing. And so, you know, the point that I think he's making there, which I think is significant, is that the reason we are in this position, the reason that we've sort of come to this state, is because of a situation that was a system of education based on 19th century thinking, not 21st century thinking. And it's a system that is largely designed to maintain and produce conformity. Now, that does not mean, therefore, that we should not have teachers. That is, in fact, the opposite of what it means. We need teachers more than ever. But it means that teachers need to be allowed to teach, and students need to be allowed to learn in their own multiple fashions, and we need to get out of this nonsense of moving them through one batch at a time. And here's the killer. If we were to create a system that was much more based, that you get on sort of an individualized level with some schools, if you were to create a system in which individual learning styles were respected and given credit, you would have far better prepared students and a much cheaper educational system in the long run. That's the killer. In the long run, this is going to produce better students for less. But because we are so caught together with all of this, you know, it's just, exactly, Fire Snake, exactly. I love that. Well, yes, and Beljora, I would say too that, yeah, his point about the groups, his point about that he would not argue with you about that. His argument is that there is a constant sort of obsession with individual ranking, right? And like individual versus individual accomplishment and merit. And his point is that in the real world, what you do is form communities. Like even the most individual people who hate people and never want to see people, even those people have someone they care about. Even those people, we are biologically hardwired to be social in some fashion. And so that's what he's arguing. He's arguing that to split kids off, therefore, and keep them from ever connecting with each other, keep them from having discussions, keep them from coming together in group work, keep them from doing all that stuff, you are artificially separating them when it's not going to be effective. But that's not to say that, the homeschooling thing is an issue. By the way, I'm not necessarily in favor of widespread homeschooling because I also think that there are people who don't really know what they're doing when it comes to teaching. I mean, I do think you need people who are trained to be able to do this at a certain point. I think parents can do it for a while, but I do think eventually you need people, unless they're trained themselves, you do need people who are sort of trained to do it. The question, though, is trained in what? If it's trained in, let me give you a bunch of papers and you just sort of look at and sort papers on a desk, that's one thing. But if you're talking about training people who can help students find something within themselves, that's what you want. I am teaching students in my classes about Lord of the Rings, yes, and about Harry Potter, and about revenge tragedy, and about fantasy fiction, science fiction, about creative writing. That's true. But I am also teaching them, most importantly, regardless of content, to be better thinkers. I want them coming out of my classes thinking better. I want them coming out of my classes thinking about literature and about what it means to be human in a different way, in a better way. That's much more important than open mouth and feed, like they're a baby bird and I feed them food and then close the mouth. That is garbage teaching. Teaching involves training someone to be a better thinker. And when you anesthetize kids, and I absolutely agree with him, that's what's happening. And to go back to what Wolfboy said, it's not that there aren't some kids who need drugs that will really help them focus, because ADHD is a legitimate thing. The problem is that it's not a legitimate thing when it's used for something like some exorbitant number, like 40% of the populace. That's not rational. And the reason that's being done is to anesthetize the kids and to shut them up. And Pink Floyd said it best, right? There's all you are is another brick in the wall. That is exactly what's being done with this system. So no, and I mean, I'm sad to hear that, Sundair, and I've heard it from others. And I believe me, as a teacher myself, I mean, I taught in an inner city high school in Hartford, Connecticut, with a 50% dropout rate. I know the deal, okay? And a lot of the teachers that I saw there, a lot of them were working their asses off. So it does bother me that teachers become the fall guys for this, and everyone attacks teachers who are supposed to be father, mother, psychologist, cook. They're supposed to feed children. They're supposed to, right? It bothers me then that we attack these people who are getting paid a fraction of what their far richer, cohorts that went to law school and medical school and all that are doing. And yet they're the sort of favorite whipping boys for everyone to get yelled at, like Christie and these jackasses. So I feel bad, so that's the case. I want to put that over there. That said, I have certainly heard more than one, and I've seen more than one horror story of teachers who either because they were burned out or because they just wanted to make things easy for themselves did that by sort of wanting kids to shut up. And that's awful. And I'm sorry that happened if you were one of those people. I really am. And I apologize on behalf of my profession. All I can tell you is that's not what I did. That's not what the people I trained with did. That's not the way that I learned. It wasn't the way my father, who was a professor was a teacher for 40 years, did. That's not what we did. And most dedicated teachers I know do this somehow and provide tremendous education in spite of everything. And I just wish that administrators would get the hell out of the way, that the politicians would get the hell out of the way, and would provide funding and money, and then would let the educators do their goddamn jobs and get out of the way and stop attacking them so they can score points with the public. That's what I wish. And I feel terrible for children that went through it. I know the feeling. I went through the system too. But it is not, I don't think the sort of what we want to have come out of that is everyone go off into your own individual corners and whoever can afford the best education wins. That would be a tragedy. So I always feel bad when I hear stories like that, and I am sorry, but that's not what I do. And it's not the way that most of the teachers that I do did that as well. 100%. 100%, Dragon Spear, you need to bring back arts and shop classes. 100%. 100%. And I'll tell you this right now, and this is nothing against folks who are in STEM. I certainly understand the importance of, I understand the importance of math and reading, and I get it. But if you take away music from kids, if you take away drama from kids, if you take away the fine arts from kids, you are handicapping them in all those fields, including science and math. You are handicapping children in math when you take away music, because study after study after study has demonstrated that a greater knowledge of music and music theory translates directly to greater knowledge of mathematical knowledge. This is a pedagogical fact. So when you remove music from them, you're not just taking away music, you're also taking away math. When you remove fine arts classes, and you remove the learning that goes on when someone learns how to sculpt and how to understand proportion and how to understand scale, you are hurting them both in math and in science, because they learn to understand relative portions. They learn to understand relative scale, one thing to another. And forget about what happens when you take away learning in the humanities so that they forget about what it means to be a better human being. Like, let's forget about social education and ethics and all those other kinds of things. When you take away the arts, this is what you do. So a shop class, Heischel, is like wood or metal shop. Like when I was a kid going to high school, we had wood shop, which is like you would go to this place and you would do like woodworking. Like you would learn how to make like shelves or like a table or a chair or something like that. And in metal shop, I didn't take metal shop, but metal shop you could build like, sculptures, or sometimes kids would get really advanced and would build like one kid built a bike. Like did a bike in metal shop. So it's, it's working with the hands basically, right? And it's something which used to happen a lot, and then it got cut along with every arts class under the sun, because who needs music? Answer: everybody. Everybody needs the arts. Everyone needs to take a shop class. Everyone does, because the connections that are made there apply to everything. And so and the amazing thing is, if you talk to corporations about this, companies are not asking for people who can come out and recite what the CEOs tell them to say. Companies are like, we need people who can communicate. We need people who can think creatively. We need people who can think outside the box. In other words, companies want exactly the opposite of what the current system is preparing students to do. The current system is preparing students to shut up and sit down and conform and listen to bells waiting for the bells to ring so they can leave class. That is exactly the opposite of what companies want. So, this pie in the sky thing about what teachers think, and like, oh, well, we're off doing our own thing, is such, pardon me, bullshit. Because what it relates to fundamentally is a misapprehension of what actually is needed for the student. And what a student needs is to learn to use this, and to connect this, preferably, with this, so that the head and the heart can actually produce a well-educated and well-thought-out, well-prepared for thinking human being who is ready to enter the society and become a productive member of it. That is what is needed. Not data and numbers and ever more obsession with how many tests you can stick. Do you guys know that right now, fully something on the order of 35 school days in an 8 to 9 month year, so basically 1 full month, is dedicated to testing or preparation for testing directly. And I'm not even talking about other sort of studying for the exam. I'm talking about a full month plus is dedicated, of the school year now in high schools in America, are dedicated to just testing. That is insanity. It is absolute insanity. It's insanity. It's insanity, and it's generated and run for one reason and one reason alone, and that is conformity. I shouldn't say that. 2 reasons. Conformity is one, and do you know the other? Do you know who's making lots and lots and lots of bank? You know who's making tons of money off standardized testing? Go talk to the people at ETS and ask them who's doing well, and they'll tell you. ETS is doing a bang-up job. For those of you from Europe, ETS is the International Testing Service. They are the main folks who handle the SAT, the standardized, the Scholastic Aptitude Test, or the PSAT, or the GRE. Standardized test companies are doing just great. They're making a fortune on this stuff. Education, in the meantime, goes to hell. And, you know, the point here, and by the way, yeah, no, I hear you, Bozora. And again, my point here is not to say that all tests are bad all the time. My point is that the scales are so tipped in their favor that it will take a long time to get us back to some kind of normalcy. In a high school setting, a couple of tests in a semester, like a half of a year, fine. 5, 6, 8, 10, insanity. Having kids having to stay up in fourth grade to do homework so they can prepare for a standardized test is insanity. It's abuse. Do you know that my daughter, who is in second grade now, has friends who have 2 hours of homework a night in second grade? Thank you, Biohazard. I appreciate it. Hey, Dark. In second grade, we're going to give a kid 2 hours of homework a night in second grade. And then we wonder, when they get to 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, we wonder why they hate school. Gee, I can't imagine why. We drug them. We tell them to shut the hell up and don't ask questions. We tell them to stop being curious. We tell them not to collaborate. We tell them they need to do 2 hours of homework at a time when they ought to be outside playing. Yet somehow we're amazed that they come out of it hating school. I can't imagine. We judge things based upon the profit a company makes rather than the people they're supposed to serve, and we're shocked when the people don't like it. I'm sorry, but this, and I would argue that there is no more important issue that faces America right now, and I can't speak for the rest of the world, but I know that there is no more important issue facing America right now than this one. And that's because I think that our educational problems, our educational issues, the constant attacks on teachers, the undercutting of the public education system, the massive obsession with testing, all of these things are going to make it that much more difficult to handle any other issue that we face. You want to understand how to deal with climate change? Produce scientists. You want to get scientists produced? Make them actually give a damn about science. Make them curious. Don't overwhelm them with numbers. Make them curious about the field. You want people to come out feeling like they ought to care more about people than profit? Teach them literature. Teach them music. Teach them art. Teach them what it means to be a human being. And if you don't do that, then don't sit on your hands up in Washington and go, I can't imagine why. I don't really understand why we're not going to the math, arts, and sciences. Gee, genius, I wonder why. I wonder why. It is criminal. It is criminal what is being done. And it is laid at the feet of the corporations that run testing. It is laid at the feet of the businessmen who think they know more about education than the educators do. And it is laid at the feet of the politicians who, rather than supporting the teachers who are doing the best job they can, and are trying to help parents who are doing the best they can usually as well, instead use teachers as a convenient scapegoat and scream and yell at them. It is a crime. And I think that there are ways out of it. I think there's ways that we can address it. But I do not think it is going to come by talking about how much standardized testing we can put on the head of a pin. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry for going off on that, but I Sundare. I mean, listen. Now, not all of you may like this book, okay? I'm just using this as an example. Learning to read this, learning this, reading this will do more to advance a student's education than 100 million examples of tests and data and numbers, showing them this. For those of you in the math and sciences, teaching people the experiments that make science fascinating, showing them the cosmos, showing them chemical reactions, showing them physical experiments. Even better, letting them do physical experiments, letting them screw up the experiments so they can learn. That will teach them 1,000,000 times more than any number of textbooks and forms and figures and templates and sheets and tests that you want to give them. Yeah, Thorg was talking about the Common Core. Again, my objection is not so much to the Common Core, because I do think that there are things that it helps for everybody to learn. My objection, number one, is how we construct the Common Core, and two, my objection is that they tie the Common Core to testing, and I am highly against the obsessive testing we have now. I think testing needs to be 100% in the other direction. Testing should be minimized. Right now, it's maximized. It's dead opposite of what it should be. Well, thanks, Firesnake. I appreciate that. I mean, you guys know that I go periodically, once in a while, I go on these rants. But it just, I've been there, you know? And I saw these kids doing this. I'll tell you guys a story. I taught in Bulkley High School in Hartford, Connecticut, and I was there in 1994, student teaching, okay? Bulkley High School has a 50% dropout rate. Huge proportion. There was gang violence, which was not that, actually, had not been around that long. It was about 1989 that gangs really entered into the picture in Hartford, Connecticut. Heavily, diverse population, heavily poverty-stricken population, the whole 9 yards, right? I was teaching a class of kids in what was called senior remedials. Senior remedials was basically, I had like maybe 12 students or so. These were the kids that were struggling. They were seniors in high school, but they were struggling with kind of the basics, right? And a lot of them, like, there were something like 6 girls in the class. 3 of them were pregnant or had kids already. Okay, so the whole 9 yards, right? But here's the thing that people don't think about. All of those kids, every single one of those senior remedial kids, were arguably a success story because they were the kids that didn't drop out, right? Can you imagine what it's like to be in a senior remedial class? You're trying to catch up as a senior in high school, and yet somehow, unlike the vast majority of their classmates who were in that same boat, like I said, 50% dropout, most of those would have been people that would have been in a senior remedial class. They were in that class. And those kids are sitting in that class, right? Those kids are sitting in that class trying to catch up and learn. I assigned these students an essay about a significant decision they had to make in their life. And it was, I think, related to, I want to say that I may have taught The Outsiders. It was a class assigned book, I think, and so I had to teach The Outsiders, and I think it was The Outsiders. Anyway, so there was a particular decision that Ponyboy makes or something, and so I ended up teaching that, and I asked them to write an essay in which they talked about that. I got an essay, I will never forget this, I got an essay from a student. Who handed me this sheet. And on the sheet, he talked about the decision that he made that he was most proud of was the time that he did not pull the trigger of a gun that he had held at the head of another boy as part of a gang initiation. He was told to kill this kid so he could get into a gang. And he was proud of the fact that he had chosen not to do that. Now, you explain to me, you tell me which one of these jackasses that are calling for political policy, that are calling for standardized tests, that sit in rooms in these universities and say, I know what we'll do. Why don't we ask these people questions about various aspects of farming technology? You tell me which one of those has ever in their life talked to a kid like that. Find me one of them. Find me one. They don't go into their cities. They don't go into their classrooms. They don't give a good goddamn about them. They sure as hell care about the soundbite, but they don't care about that kid. Well, I do. And teachers that I saw did also. And the students that we saw come out of that classroom, those are kids that you better know what you're dealing with when you go in there. And they were the success stories. In my 20 plus years of teaching, I have never, ever, once in my life met a kid who at some level didn't want to learn. I met plenty of kids who were messed up because of difficult home environments, because their cousin got shot the night before, because they had no food, because their parents were beating each other up on a regular basis, because there were drugs, because I ran into plenty of kids who were messed up. I ran into plenty of kids who acted out. And when I got into college, I ran into some kids that were entitled too. I ran into lots of them. But I have never ran into a child, not once, who didn't at a basic level want to learn. And you know why? Because we are hardwired to do it. We are hardwired to learn. We are hardwired to be educated. We want to learn. We want to be human like this. We want to know about science because it's fascinating. We want to know about math because math is interesting and ties into everything in the world. We want to do that. We have to work hard to get people out of education. We have to fight to get them uninterested. We have to drug them to keep them from caring. But I will never forget that kid whose name was Lewis, by the way. I will never forget that kid. I will never forget that essay. And I will never forget that that is the student that is getting ignored by these people. Not just in Washington, D.C. This is not an anti-government rant. This is an anti-business people that know more than educators do rant. Because they don't. So... yes, you make a good point, Shabby. Let's get into the games. Yes, you're right. So I apologize, guys, but it's in here. It's not in an exam. Sorry. No, you're quite right. Thank you, Shabby. Thank you. And if you, well, yeah, I appreciate that. And if you got, listen, and if any of what I just said meant something to you, I just saw AMC saying go for your teaching degree. We need you. We need you. And I'm not going to pretend that it's easy, because it's not, because you have a lot of institutional places that are against you. But it is starting to change. There are parents who are starting to turn against this and are starting to work with the teachers instead of against them. But we need more of them. So. Okay. Oh, thanks, guys. Thanks. Yeah, I know. Overall, this channel is 90 million percent. You know, obviously 90 million percent is gaming, but once in a while. Woo! Oh, thanks, Firesnake. Thanks, Blackberry. Well, I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I mean, you know, when I like joking aside, no one rants. I don't want to make people feel weird about a rant, but I believe it though. I believe it. I really do. So I hear you, Money. I hear you, Money. Yeah, for sure, Heavens. And again, this is not an anti-business thing. Oh my God, loud. This is not an anti-business thing either, really. It's just an again, it just annoys me that if I go into a business setting, I wouldn't be expected to know anything about profit and loss statements, but apparently everyone is supposed to know everything about my business. That's all. And business people are the ones calling the shots at these board of trustees, and, you know, that's why there's so much emphasis on data and numbers. That's all. I'm not, believe me, I know you're a logistics guy, so I'm not, you know, in any way attacking business per se, but that is the sort of dominant kind of paradigm at the moment, and so that's all. Okay. Oh, thanks, Fire. Well, thanks, pal. Is always uncomfortable. Really, Willie? All right, well, having said all that, now it's time to blow away some goddamn bad guys. Huh? What do you say? Who's with me? Hype, 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 hype. This guy's like, I will win for the children! Oh, God. Sorry about that. Hi, Alphador. Yeah, what's going on, man? Sorry, guys. I have started my Good Old Games gig. Yes.